Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm here today to do a book tag. Nobody tagged me in it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Try to stop me. It's the Anti TBR tag. This was started by Nicole and her books. I will link her original video down below. So I'm sure all of you are familiar with a TBR. It's a to be read, books that and authors that you want to read. The Anti TBR is about books and authors you do not want to read. So a little bit controversial. I've seen some controversial opinions floating around on BookTube, and I thought, why not throw my hat in that? And let's dive right in. And right with prompt number one, I'm gonna pee in the pool on something a lot of people think is popular. So prompt number one is a popular book everyone, all caps, everyone loves that you have no interest in reading. And the nitpicky person in me really wants to say, well, you're never really going to find something everyone loves, like literally everyone, but something that I think a lot of people certainly love and adore and are really excited about is A Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. The entire series, I am just not interested in reading. And I've never seen an episode of the TV show. I hope I never do see an episode of the TV show, particularly from things I've heard that people have said about the way the TV show ended. I realized they diverged from the books because at a certain point they ran out of books, and it's taken George R.R. Martin a long time to release the next book in the series. I don't know if it's the last book or the next book. Don't quite care to look it up right now. But I just don't feel very interested in the book or the series at all, and will probably never do it. What I've discovered is that science fiction and fantasy tend to be the areas I struggle the most, which is funny because I would not, if you had asked me a year ago, what genre do you struggle with the most, I probably would have said something different. And it turns out it's science fiction and fantasy. So there's already that barrier, but then there's the fact that it's a really long book, and then you hear some of the things that go on in it. Maybe that's more about the TV show, because a lot more people responded to the TV show than the books, at least out loud in pop culture. And it just doesn't seem like anything I'm really interested in, and especially given the fact that all of the books are so long and there's so many of them, I don't really feel like I want to devote my time and energy to that when there are so many other things out there that I could put my time and energy into. Prompt number two, a classic book or author you do not have an interest in reading. So I thought about this a lot, and there are some authors, like classic authors, that I'm reluctant to read, but I probably could be persuaded and would do them. So I'm kind of doing a twist on this question, and I'm going to go with an author whose books I have read, but there are other books that author has read that I am absolutely not interested in. And this is Brian at Bookish. I am sorry. The author is J.R.R. Tolkien. So I've read The Hobbit, loved The Hobbit actually. I read The Fellowship of the Rings and The Two Towers, and I DNF'd The Return of the King. I didn't intend to, I just wanted a break because I read all of those books back to back, and I needed some time away from the series. So that's all I ever intended, and now almost 20 years have passed because I was reading them as The Fellowship of the Ring was released in theaters, and I never got back. I'm sorry. And I would get back. I would finish The Lord of the Rings. I know that's a lot of, the last time I mentioned that I hadn't finished the Lord of the Rings books, a lot of people were scandalized by that. But so I would finish that. What I'm specifically talking about here is all of the other books about the history of Middle Earth and all the supplemental material that J.R.R. Tolkien released. I admit I don't really have any interest in that. I'm sorry. And again, you can probably see a thread because my first two answers are within the realm of science fiction and fantasy. And you can see that that's something I struggle with and tend not to be as interested in. And I appreciate the level of world building that J.R.R. Tolkien and George R.R. Martin have done, and the dedication that they have had to the universes that they've built. I just don't feel very interested in all of that beyond J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit and the actual Lord of the Rings books. Like, I would do those, but I don't really want to know what else happened or like the history that led up to that and any of that stuff. Sorry. Prompt number three, an author whose books you have no interest in reading. Again, there are a couple of directions I could have gone. And actually, there's a part two to this question, and you have the option of lumping them together, but I'm going to keep them separate. And for this one, I'm going to say Nicholas Sparks, because it's not the romance, it's not the genre or the format or anything like that. That's all fine. And I have I've dabbled in romance books and I found that I really like them. I can't stop watching holiday romance movies on streaming right now because it's the only thing keeping me happy and sane in this insane world we've been living in 2020. So it's not that. It's mostly that from everything I've heard and all the plots that I've heard and the reviews of the movies adaptations that have come out, it sounds really cloying and very emotionally manipulative, and I really don't like either one of those things. And I have seen the film version of The Notebook, and I thought it's good. It's better than I expected it would be, but it is kind of cloying and emotionally manipulative in a way that I don't appreciate. So I feel like I would just never get along with any of Nicholas Sparks's books. No disrespect to anybody who reads them. He's obviously a best-selling author. There are a lot of people who get joy out of his books and the kind of writing and emotional content that he puts into them, but it's just probably not for me. Part 2 of that question is a problematic author whose books you have no interest in reading. And the answer immediately jumped to me for that. It's Bret Easton Ellis. I think he seems like the kind of person who thrives on negative energy and really enjoys doing and saying controversial things to get attention, and he just thrives on that. And my reaction to people like that is always to just completely shut them out and not give them any kind of attention at all. Because if you get angry at them, they've won. If you agree with them, they've won. So no sense giving them any kind of reaction or time or energy at all. And that is me and Bret Easton Ellis. I will not go into why he's problematic. You are free to do a Google search if you would like. I'm sure you will find a lot of results. There is a time when I probably could have been persuaded to read, say, American Psycho. He certainly had a moment with like film adaptations in the early 2000s. But I didn't get around to them before I started learning about actual Bret Easton Ellis, and that was really, there was no turning back from that for me. I just don't want to give him any time or attention or any of that, and it's the way it is. Prompt number 4, an author you have read a couple of books from and have decided their books are not for you. I have 3 answers to this question. The first one is Otessa Moshfegh, because I wanted to like Eileen and I didn't. And I felt like there were aspects of it that I liked, but it was kind of, it's not the Bret Easton Ellis thing, but it does feel like the book is trying to deliberately gross you out. And that's fine. An author can certainly do that. But I felt like the book is really messy structurally. And I don't really hear people complain about that. Maybe I'm the only one. But it feels like the book just doesn't work if you examine it closely. And I don't really like the tone. I don't really like how negative it is. And that carries into my year of rest and relaxation, which isn't trying to prod you into feeling grossed out, but it is trying to prod you into hating its character. And it starts to feel overly negative in a way. And almost like Otessa Moshfegh, she's like deliberately trying to provoke you into negative feelings. And I just don't really have the space for that. I don't enjoy it. And I DNF'd my year of rest and relaxation. And that is when I said, you know what, this is just not for me. And I don't think it's possible I will revisit one of her books, but I don't have any interest in revisiting any more of her writing, at least for the time being. The next answer to the question about an author you have read a couple of books from and have decided their books are not for you is Malcolm Gladwell. And that's a little disappointing because I really did enjoy his books and his podcast for a while. And he actually did something on Twitter last week that made me decide he's another author that I'm just not going to give any space to. So this is probably the last time you will be hearing the name Malcolm Gladwell come out of my mouth on this channel. I think he always has interesting ideas, but frequently when you read one of his books, say like Outliers or David and Goliath, he'll have an interesting idea and then he has a whole bunch of illustrations about that topic throughout the book. Some of them don't actually really relate to that topic very well. Some of them don't prove the point he's trying to go for in the way that he seems to think they do. So there's always a bit of like a messy chaos to his books. But sometimes it also feels like he kind of critically misses the point about something. And he thinks he thinks he is genuinely the only person who actually understands what's going on, and he's going to show you the real story. And the more he is a public figure, the more he releases these books and gets an audience, it feels like the more certain he is that he is right about everything. And that's where things start to get really problematic. So his last book, Talking to Strangers, really grossed me out a lot. I got very angry reading it. It was one of my least favorite books of last year. And it basically, he takes things that he thinks people have popularly misunderstood and talks about them in really gross ways. He talks about the sex scandal at Penn State, where the assistant coach was found to have been molesting children. There had been indications all along that this was something that was going on, and they were never investigated. And of course, once it did come out and it was revealed that people did have knowledge of the accusations against him and that there was potentially something problematic going on, it became a bigger thing. And then there were repercussions. They had their titles stripped. People got fired. And Malcolm Gladwell's argument is, oh, no. They were right to not trust the accusations. And then he goes on, and it doesn't really make sense, because he's talking about we have this instinct to trust strangers. And there's an instinct to trust is what he's talking about. But the book is specifically supposed to be talking about strangers. So this is one of those situations where what he's saying doesn't actually fit what he's arguing, because he's saying there's an instinct to trust a stranger because you don't know any better. But they're talking about people who have worked together for a really long time. So I guess over time he's saying that the instinct to trust would build. So when somebody makes an accusation against that person, you tend to trust the person when they say, no, I'm not doing that. But when an accusation is made, and when a second accusation is made and things like that, don't you think you would want to look into it and get it right? Like, it doesn't work. And then he talks about the Brock Turner case and decides to take the stance that it's not right for at that time, Chanel Miller was unknown. Her name, she was only known as, I think Jane Doe was the name she went by. But she was not known. She came out and identified herself shortly after Talking to Strangers came out, and when Know My Name was published. So he kind of argues that she can't claim that she was assaulted when she was blackout drunk. And it's so gross. So that's an author I am not. And the thing that he did last week, he came out defending Jeffrey Toobin. And it's really just the way he defended him, where he was saying, it's like, well, everybody's condemning him, but they're not saying what they're condemning him for. When it's pretty obvious what people are condemning him for. If you don't know it, Google Jeffrey Toobin, and I'm sorry. So I'm pretty much done with Malcolm Gladwell at this point. The other one is Dan Brown. I feel like first of all, I don't like it. I don't think he's a good writer. I think the books are kind of terrible. I didn't like the Da Vinci Code, and my sister insisted that I had to read Angels and Demons, and I did. And I threw it across the room in frustration, because there's just, the plotting in that book is literally insane, and I did not like it. The other thing that really made me mad is that, at least after I had read the Da Vinci Code, I thought to myself, well, the art history part is at least interesting. And as I was reading Angels and Demons, there was I think it was The Fountain. So he's talking about Raphael being subversive and hiding pagan imagery in the statue. And that is one of the symbols that they're supposed to discover along the way. And it was supposed to be like a subversive thing that he did secretly. And I was unfamiliar with the appearance of the fountain, so I looked it up online and found that actually all of that pagan imagery was specifically commissioned to be in the fountain. And that made me start questioning things. I started Googling some of the other works of art that he had referenced, and found that he's basically misrepresenting art history in a very irresponsible way. And, I get it. It's fiction. You probably shouldn't trust it to be accurate. However, people do trust, because he's an art historian, and people assume that everything he's talking about in those books is true, and it turns out it's not. And that's really what made me particularly angry about Dan Brown. But anyway, let's keep going. Prompt number 5, a genre you have no interest in, or a genre you tried to get into and couldn't. Well, I've mentioned sci-fi fantasy, but I keep trying with sci-fi fantasy because I feel like there is a way in for me, and I just need to find that. And the thing I really struggle with and tend to find gross is paranormal. Gross is the hard word. Paranormal romance. I really struggle with it. I feel like nothing makes me nope faster when looking at the plot description of a book than finding out that it has a paranormal romance element into it. Like even though I don't buy ebooks, I still get ebook deals newsletters, and if I'm reading the plot of something and it mentions like so and so is a werewolf, but yeah, it immediately, if I see the word shifter, it's like my brain immediately just goes no, and kind of. And again, no disrespect to anybody who's into that kind of thing, it's just really not for me. Yeah, and I did read the first Twilight book. I did not like it at all. So, and again, maybe there's a book out there that would convince me otherwise, but that no, by and large, it's a no for me. Prompt number 6, a book you have bought but will never read. This can be a book you've unhauled or returned to the library unread. I'm going to go with a book that I bought. And again, I could potentially read this someday. The likelihood is just really low. It's Moby Dick or The Whale by Herman Melville. The story itself sounds really interesting, but a lot of the feedback I see about it online and in reviews is that it actually has, it's a chunky book, and that a lot of this is actually about sailing, almost nonfiction, like nitty-gritty details about knots and things like that. And this is that's a lot of book to do that. So, and I feel like the other part of it is that I feel like I have such an understanding of what Herman Melville is doing in this, just from other people talking about it and talking about Captain Ahab and things like that, that it almost feels like I don't need to read it. However, part of me feels like then you should read it just to see if everybody is missing the point, or if there's more to it than just what everybody is condensing it down to. But the likelihood that I'll get to it, really slim. There are other really long books. It's not 1,000 pages. It's somewhere in the 830 page range. At least this edition is. But I would probably be more likely to read The Tale of Genji or even like Don Quixote, although I've heard similar things said about Don Quixote that I've complained about this one too. But it feels like of the really lengthy classic books, this is probably the one that I would go for last. So that's why I'm going to go with Moby Dick by Herman Melville. Prompt number 7, a series you have no interest in reading or a series you started and have DNF'd. I could go right back to Game of Thrones, which was my answer for the first question, but I feel like that would be cheating. So here's a different answer. Chronicles of Narnia. And again, apologies. There's nothing wrong with the writing, but I did read the first book in the series, which was actually published later. It's The Magician's Nephew. It's like, I think it was published later as a sort of prequel to the other books, and I just did not like it. And so part of me feels like I should probably maybe read one of the other books to give it a chance, but I'm just not that interested. So I think that's a series I will probably never get around to. Another one, and this is super controversial. His Dark Materials books. I read the first one, didn't enjoy it anywhere near as much as many people do. And then I started the second one and just started questioning myself about, like, why am I doing this to myself? I don't have to read these books. So I put it down, and I'm sorry. I just did not enjoy it. And that was a shock and a bit of a disappointment, because from everything people say about that book, I really thought I was going to love it, and I didn't. So, sorry. Yeah, Chronicles of Narnia and His Dark Materials books. And I love that other people do love those books, and I support them. I just will not be continuing in them myself. At least I don't plan to at this moment. So, the final prompt is prompt number 8. A new release you have no interest in reading, and this kind of goes back to the idea of a series. It's Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. Also Ready Player 1, which is not a new release, so I'm going with Ready Player 2. It feels like that, again, we're back to like the sci-fi fantasy thing and how much I struggle with that, but also the kind of the relentlessly self-referential pop culture mishmash I know people love nostalgia, but it doesn't quite do it for me. And I feel like you can't necessarily build an entire thing around that. And I didn't even see the movie because it's still just not quite interesting to me. And I'm glad that a lot of people love it and enjoy it, but I don't feel any need. Like, if I want to revisit any of the things that are referenced in it, I will just watch the thing. And that will be my nostalgia for it. I don't really need to see them repurposed into something else. So that is my version of the Anti TBR tag. I'm going to do my typical thing where I'm not going to tag anybody specifically. A lot of people have already done this anyway. So I'm just going to say that if you're watching this and you want to do it, do it. Nobody tagged me, and here I am. So do that. Go ahead and do your thing. If you'd like to do it, do it. Tell them I sent you. And anyway, I hope things in here were not super controversial. Again, no disrespect to anyone who enjoys any of the things that I've disrespected, I guess, in this video, or said I'm not interested in. You fully have a right to enjoy all of these things, just like I have a right not to. And here we are. So, as always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.